My name is Adam LZ. I race in Pro 1 Formula Drift. I make videos and I build cars. How I first got into cars, I would probably attribute mostly to, being a kid, playing with Hot Wheels, video games. In the early days, I think it was Need for Speed Underground back on the PC, just kind of getting exposed to cars from that way, and then, eventually turning 16, getting a car and actually getting into real cars. I never really wanted to work on cars. I never really liked working on cars. I did aesthetic things to my first car. When I got my E92 335i, that one, I dabbled a little bit more, but it was still never something I was good at. I never really had a lot of tools or anything. But I would say when I got my first S13, it was kind of a necessary evil to learn how to work on cars, because I got into drifting. I like drifting a lot, and quite honestly, you can't drift if you don't know how to work on a car. So I learned out of necessity to be able to drive more, and then from there, still, if something breaks, I can fix it. I feel like I have a good brain for it. I'm definitely not the best mechanic. I wouldn't call myself a mechanic, but I can usually figure stuff out. When I was younger, I definitely didn't expect to own as many cars that I have now, nor was it even really a goal. I always had goals that were based around cars, but I guess they would shift based on whatever the next tier of success for me was. I was in a really cool spot where I was able to travel around, I could drift, and I can go to pretty much whatever track I want. We could build awesome cars, but it wasn't really challenging. It didn't give me enough purpose, I guess, as an individual. For my team as well, there was no real clear direction of what we were going towards. So when I started competing in Formula Drift, it was more so for myself, to push myself as a driver, and also to have a collective goal for our team. Rather than just building cars and drifting aimlessly, I like to have a purpose, something to work towards, and that's kind of what got me in the Formula Drift organization. In the early days of making videos, I made sure to show every single spin out, every single dumb mistake I made, working on the car, driving, and it's cool because someone can go back and look at my videos, especially nowadays with simulators, and they can see how many events it took me to be able to link a track. So now when someone goes and they link a track to their first event, they're like, oh my God, I could drive in Formula Drift. It's absolutely realistic. Anyone could follow this path. Obviously, you got to be dedicated and you got to be able to be focused to get here, but it's not this far-fetched dream where you have to be born a race car driver to be able to do it. So in Formula Drift, I've driven my original S15, the RTR Mustang Spec 5 FD, and now my E36. Oh, I guess, and I rented an S14, two S14s, one from Matt Field and one from Odie. Yeah, so this year it was not supposed to really be a season where I was competing as much as I have been. I had my E36 and I did really well with it in other competitions last year, and it was kind of like the ongoing joke of oh, you should bring that car to FD, you drive it so good. But I never thought it would be competitive. It's front radiator, it's still stock gas tank, stock brake booster. It's very much so like a Pro-Am or grassroots style car that makes good power. So I didn't expect it to be competitive. We showed up to Long Beach and I was baffled by how easy it was to drive and still be really fast. So this year's kind of been we're just doing this, and then we do really well, so we get amped up, we go to another round, and sure enough, I think I'll have done the entire season by the end of the year. So after the crash, I got an overwhelming amount of support from my fans and from my team as well, and we were able to swing building a new car and actually raise enough money to be able to follow through with finishing out the rest of the season. So it's something that I absolutely wanted to do, but I was in a position where I was making a big boy decision of I probably shouldn't do this or it's gonna make things too tight to be comfortable. So here we are, we're in Utah and we're gonna be finishing out the rest of the season. Yeah. My goal in Formula Drift was to podium. That was my be all end all. I was like, once I podium, I'm good. That's all I need, and then I can focus on whatever my heart wants. And then I think it was actually my first podium in Pro 1. I actually won the event, and that was last year at E-Town. From there, this year, I was I kind of didn't have any stress. I didn't really have any sort of goal other than just we'll see if the E36 does well. Once it did well, it was okay, let's see if we can podium in this thing too. So this year, it's a stretch, but it would be a goal of mine to finish in top 3 in points. Next year, I'm doing a full season for sure, and my goal is going to be to get first. I think that it's absolutely realistic to be a champion in that car, and that's what my goal next year is going to be. This is my competition E36. Let's get under the hood. I'll probably start with the things that make this car the most unique, and those are the things that are actually still stock, which typically aren't left in a competition car. One being that this car still retains the stock factory gas tank. That was a decision that we made early on from a cost perspective and being able to keep the weight nice and low. It also still retains factory pedals, the factory brake booster, and under the hood, you guys will see that one very unique thing is that this car is still front radiator. It was a decision that I made early on, kind of from a cost perspective, but I grew to like it from a weight balance. So you'll see it is an aftermarket radiator and it is moved a little bit farther forward, but for the most part, it's still in a factory location. Engine-wise, this is a 3.4 liter Brian Crower 2JZ with a big Garrett G40 turbo. We run a little bit nitrous to spool it. Another unique thing that you'll see underneath the hood is a stock intake manifold. We found them to be much better from a torque perspective. It's actually a little bit more compact, and even though you'd think it'd be more complicated to service, it actually makes it a little bit easier than having a big plenum where it's hard to access underneath. This car, we made the switch to electric power steering. That's an Opal pump. And other than that, we got some Vibrant Performance goodies under here. D-Works fueling. We're using all Link ECU products to control this 2JZ. I've always loved how they sounded, and I've kind of grown to find it to be my engine of choice. I feel like we've got the recipe pretty good. Moving backward in the car, I guess body-wise, we've just got a bunch of fiberglass. This is fiberglass, factory fender underneath, fiberglass doors, stock pretty much M3 body kit. This is a fiberglass roof, just because we didn't have time to get a carbon fiber one on the new chassis. On the other cars, we actually have carbon roofs, but this is pretty cool. This is a fashion film by Steck that looks exactly like carbon fiber. So most people wouldn't even know. I know it's kind of cheating, but I wanted to have that same look as the old car, and it's actually a really good paint protection film that will protect the paint as well. The windows are all plastic for performance, polycarbonate. You can see the little nitrous bottle hiding in there. Got these fancy little clips that make it really easy to service everything. So when the guys need to do bottle change or something, this would be how they would access everything. You can kind of reach in, do what you got to do. Got the cool suit on the other side. Wheels, of course, Volk T37s. The other car has new SLs. This car is mostly OG TEs just because I had them. It wasn't necessarily a choice. I just wanted it to match the other car. And these I actually bought from someone in Europe. They're all damaged, all cracked and re-welded. So they're actually really inexpensive, but it still allowed both cars to kind of have a similar look. The trunk underneath, very, very simple crash structure, nothing too fancy. Carbon Kevlar trunk just because it gets crashed and hit a bunch. This is HGK, courtesy of Drift HQ. And then back here, you'll see we've got a quick change. Actually, another interesting thing about this car is we do run a second radiator in the rear. So for FD, where you need to do 2 laps back to back, really, really key. Could it run without it? Yes, but it's nice to have that headroom for when track temps get hot or when you kind of need a little extra cooling. The grip on this car in the rear is absolutely phenomenal. We actually run a single-way BCDS coilover. I've had the same setup from when this car was a grassroots car, basically all the way through to FD. And just by kind of changing springs and adjusting the dampers, it's been a really, really key setup in this car being as successful as it is. One other cool thing back here, we have the Radium dry brake setup. So even though we're using the factory tank, the guys can fuel it up really quick. One thing that I'm really proud of on this car is probably the only thing that I've done on this car, just this little firewall delete panel. I like using the bead roller whenever I get a chance to, and to have a little thing that I at least did on this car, since the guys pretty much did everything else, something I'm proud of. Cage on this car is beautiful. I actually bought this car off Joel, who's our media guy at Drift HQ, to save time of us having to cage another car. This is a Cage Kits cage. We sell them on Drift HQ, and they're very, very tight. You can weld them right to the chassis, and they come all pre-bent, notched, and ready to go, so it's super easy to get installed. Nice carbon fiber dash, Link electronics, Recaro seats, my absolute favorite. And other than that, interior is nothing too crazy. The cool thing about this car is just because it's so simple, in the event that you have a crash, it's pretty easy to reshell. It's not a very complicated car with a lot of fabrication. I do pride myself in having cars that look good. I know she's a little beat up right now, but we're almost coming to the end of the season. Of course, we use Griot's Garage detailing products to keep it looking good. The track spray is absolutely key in getting all the rubber off. The wheels, obviously always looking good. This is Prismatic Powder's crushed silver. We used it on the entire chassis on the Europe car. That one's all powder coated. Obviously this one we didn't have time, but we still got the matching wheels. And I guess one thing that I forgot too, we do still run stock brakes on this car. Just another thing that kind of keeps it simple and makes it easy when we need to get parts or spares, and also keeps the cost down low. One thing that's definitely been critical to my success is having a transmission that never lets me down. I used to have a lot of issues with transmissions and sequentials, and I feel like I tried a lot. Once I tried a G-Force for the first time, I was hooked. So this car has a G-Force GSR 4-speed, never lets me down, shifts like butter, and it's going to be my favorite transmission that I put in pretty much anything that I compete in nowadays. In terms of overall styling of the car, the wrap this year is very like DTM race car inspired. Because of the fact that it's stock body and doesn't have like a big crazy JDM body kit, I figured going with something a little bit more subtle that's kind of on brand with the car was more fitting. I love JDM stuff and I love the busy liveries, and I got a little bit of flair obviously with the TEs and of course the engine underneath the hood. But more than anything, I like for cars to kind of have their own identity that makes sense rather than trying to be something that's not, and I'm really happy with how it looks this year. So anyway, that's my E36. I hope you guys enjoyed checking out under the hood.